Hi guys, and welcome. I am Zoe from Phoenix Coaching, and I am joined this evening by Dan Edozie. You are tuning in to Fire 5 at Phoenix. So this is fairly new. I think this is our second month of doing this, so this will be number 6. And the basic format is people like Dan, who I've invited this evening, coming in to ask me 5 questions, and I don't get to see the questions before, so I have absolutely no idea what Dan is going to ask me this evening. I give people the theme of the month. So this month the theme is our relationship with ourselves and relationships with other people. So Dan I know through basketball. So Dan is the captain of Bristol Flyers. So Dan, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Oh yeah, sure. So my name is Dan Edozie to be exact. Play for the Flyers 8 months out of the year, Bristol Flyers basketball team, and been with them since for the last 5 seasons. This is going on my 6th season now, so it's been quite an interesting journey thus far. Outside of that, I also do a little bit of work with the youth and young people, and just trying to give them some sort of hope and resilience, and also aspirations to be the best selves that they can be on an everyday basis. So, just and then a little bit about that. I was lived in America. Played some basketball there as well, playing college level, university level, and grew up there. Spent some time there, and then but prior to that, I was born here in England. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
And so Bristol is your home now.
Yeah, kind of. It's a part of the journey. We could say it's home, but I would definitely consider it part of home. But
it feels like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So have you got some questions for me this evening?
Oh, yes, I do have some questions. Okay. So you ready for the first question?
I am as ready as I'll ever be. Shoot.
Okay, so since the theme is about relationship with yourself and others, okay, so the first question, we're going to go right into it. So when did you realize that your relationship with yourself was there, and what was that journey like?
Ooh, God, you're going straight into it. Okay, so when did I become sort of that conscious that your relationship with yourself could be worked on?
When did you become conscious of your relationship with yourself, and what was it like realizing that?
So I think I came into this quite late. I think that self-awareness, self-development, working on me probably came in not until I think probably my mid-late 20s. That's probably when I first really started to work on myself and kind of put that up there in terms of like a priority of where I wanted my focus to be. So probably my late 20s. And I think that was probably as a result of just losing myself a little bit. And I think if I had possibly grounded who I was and what I was about, I might not have been in that position. I don't know. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. But I think my late 20s was about looking at, okay, who am I? Who do I want to be? And where do I want to get myself to? What journey do I want to take myself on? And how do I make that happen? But yeah, probably you're experiencing that a lot earlier now, aren't they? There's a lot of people that are kind of working that out a little bit earlier on. But I think sometimes you need a little bit of life experience to kind of work with. But yeah, I think for me it was almost like ground zero, and it's like, right, okay, I'm starting again. So who am I? Work from the ground up. Who am I, and what do I want to be? Who do I want to become? And I guess that's where the Phoenix comes into it, of that rising from the ashes. Okay, we're starting with ashes. We're starting again. Okay, who do I want to be, and how do I want to feel about myself, and work out what that relationship is. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It's kind of like you said it earlier, where working from the ashes. So, and you said something quite interesting where you lose yourself a little bit. The interesting thing is, with that comment being said, it's not that you've lost yourself, but you're always there. It's just at what point do you connect with yourself, if that makes sense? Knowing that relationship is always been there. So, and with as your journey goes on and you're growing and you're learning about yourself, you're in that part of your journey where it's like, okay, you're connecting to this part of you, you're connecting to that part of you. When did you feel like, oh, I didn't know that this part about me was here? Like, what was that? Was there any moments in time where, you realized some of those things?
Yeah, I think it was in that. I think it was in that time. You're right. That word that you used about connecting with yourself, I think that's what's happened. I disconnected from what was important to me. I disconnected from my values. I disconnected from who I had always thought I was. So I think, it's that. I think it all happened at the same time, but I think some of it happened before I was aware that it was happening, and then some of it was more conscious focus on working that out, and some of it life worked out for me and kind of was like, yeah, this is it, this is what it looks like, and kind of using that to grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you connect with something and you kind of start to see the light a bit more. It's almost like you gain a little bit more clarity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Definitely. Yeah, definitely clarity. And I think there's a pressure for people to work it out really early on and to work it out at a young age. But I think life experience is part of what shapes that as well. I mean, I'm talking that I discovered this at an age that I don't think you've reached yet. So, it's like, when I look at it in that sense, it's like, okay, it feels like it was quite a while ago, but for some people, it's like that pressure to have that all worked out. And it's like, I didn't work that out until sort of late 20s. So, I think if people are feeling that pressure, they should know who they are and they should know what they're about. I think life has its way of working that out for you just as much as you can try and work that out for yourself. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of both.
Fair enough. That's a really good it's a really good take on it. Okay, so question number 2. I asked you a question within a question, the first one. So that question I just asked you doesn't count, okay? But it does count equally. So second question. Second question is, when do you know that you have a relationship with yourself, and what does it feel like, or what should it feel like?
Oh, I think that's a very individual. What does it feel like is probably quite an individual thing. I think for me, and which is probably why I work this through with a lot of people that I work with, it's about like living in alignment with the values, living in alignment with what's important to you, of working that bit out. How do you know what that looks like? I think there's that sense of, even when you don't have a direction, you have a sense of direction. So even when you don't have that clarity of where you're heading towards, you have an idea, you have that sense of what direction you're going in. But it's almost like that inner confidence that you know you're heading in the right direction. I think how it feels is probably quite, I want to say, inner confidence. It's like that self-assuredness of like, oh God, it's really hard to describe in what what it feels like. But I think when you know who you are, there's probably that sense of you stand up for you, but it doesn't necessarily need to be with other people, but you stand up for you within you. Like, that that's who you are. You've got that it is that inner confidence of knowing who you are, being that self-assured. I'm struggling for the words to describe it, but it's almost like you don't feel like you're questioning it. And I think sometimes we feel like in life people question us, but I think when you've got that relationship with yourself, that is secure, when it's that secure relationship, it's a healthy relationship, it's almost like it doesn't matter what tests you on the outside, it's that inner bit that you know that you'll work yourself through it, that you know who you are, what you're about, that you can get yourself through it. So it's almost not that you welcome the world to test you, but you've got like that inner confidence that when the world does test you, or when people within the world test you, that you've worked you out for you, that you'll move yourself through it, that there's not that dependency on being in a certain situation or being with certain people to work that out for you, or to help you to work that out, because you've got that bit, that sense of clarity around that bit.
So it's kind
really
of
hard thing to explain.
Yeah, no, it's almost like you're resourceful enough in thought for whatever you may truly feel within yourself, and you know that that you're not your thoughts and you're not your emotions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you are aware of, whatever, the world within you or outside of you is what's happening before your eyes. So you have this element of grounding, as you said earlier, and this element of personal stability that, if anything was to come about, then there's only one person that you can count of, and you have enough confidence to count on yourself to like overcome, to work through it. And, whether it could be trying to understand your purpose, it could be trying to, question your journey, or trying to where you're going to move forward. And again, it's always about like being in the moment, isn't it? And understanding, it's so hard. It's so hard to not get out of the moment and just stay in the moment, and not to get so wrapped up in the future of where everything is heading or whatever the case is. But equally, like if there's that sort of disturbance or that sort of unclarity in your future when you're heading, I mean, at least, in your personal sense of self that, okay, the future hasn't happened yet, but you do have enough personal like grounding to be in the moment and to work towards the future.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, you've summed up what was in my head really well there, and I think that's it. It's almost like the kind of the fundamental bits of you, like the fundamental bits of your character, the bits that can't be shaken, they can't be. Like when you work that out and you've got like that solid, it's almost like the outside will change as we kind of grow, as we age, as we change, that will all change, but it's like this bit in here is kind of solid, and it's like, okay, whatever happens, it's like that, it's almost like a trust. It's like I think the relationship with yourself is probably the biggest trust. Is that, it's that healthy relationship with yourself when you trust you, and you trust you to do what's right for you, and you trust you to make the decisions that are right for you, and kind of, again, that presence of staying in the moment and working it out, and almost that kind of mindful moving forward is really important. But I think that is that connection here that drives here rather than necessarily the other way round.
Yeah. Both of them do have to work in harmony, though.
Most of the time it feels like they can be in conflict with each other. But I think sometimes we're driven, the head driven, because it drives our thoughts, it drives the behaviors, because it feels like we need to be logical, because that's how society tells us we should be more logical. Whereas actually, I do think that the heart should drive it sometimes, and the logical should make it real and give it that perspective, and make sure that your human brain comes in and says, right, hang on a minute, let's work this out. But actually, I think, for a life of fulfillment and happiness, your heart's got to be involved in that decision-making process for sure.
100%. I guess sometimes they say follow your heart, your heart, because sometimes your heart knows better than the mind does. The heart.
Yeah, sometimes but sometimes the heart's a sprinter and the head's a very slow jogger. And the heart runs away with it, and you need to sometimes let the brain catch up and get involved as well. So
yeah, no, that is true.
Be speaking from experience there.
It's experience. Sometimes we learn things through experience that we won't learn in school. So nothing wrong with that. Okay, next question. So this question is about, why do you think some people struggle and misunderstand or misinterpret the importance of having a relationship with yourself?
So why do they misunderstand that? Like, so they don't understand why it's important?
Yes. Why do you think some people, when they hear about it, they don't truly understand the nature and the importance of it and how it benefits their own personal life?
So, yeah, so certainly from talking through conversations that I've had with different people. So when we, when I work with people and we look at working out their relationship with themselves and with other people, quite often what we look at is, what are your needs? So like you've got your human needs, but then you've got the longer list of things that are important to us, the things that we need to have in life to have that fulfillment or feel that sense of happiness. So when we look at how those are met, most people will look at how other people help them to meet that. And very rarely do they just start off with what they do to meet that themselves. So again, there's that reliance on other people. So I think from my point of view, when you work out that relationship with yourself, and I think this is why it's important, is that then other people are adding to it. They're not filling the gap, they're almost adding an extra layer. And I think when we don't focus on ourselves first, then we look for other people or situations or things to fulfill those needs. And we sometimes will do that with one person or one type of situation or one kind of behavior. So I think when we can do most of that ourselves, again, there's that we're not relying on an external thing or person to fulfill that. So we can, people then add to it or situations add to it. I think when I think the importance of working it out for you, and I think the importance for understanding who you are and what makes you and being comfortable with yourself and working that through for yourself, is that it makes it a lot easier for other people to understand. So I think if you are still trying to work that out of what your relationship with yourself is, it makes it very hard for other people to step in and to be involved in that, because it's almost like they're coming into it and they're coming into something that's not quite stable, to use the word that you use, that stability. If the relationship with yourself isn't stable, then how do other people come in and add to that or be involved in that relationship if it's not stable and you're still working it out? So I think sometimes having that time out to work that out for you and to get that stability and get that clarity can be really helpful to then for other people to come in and add to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What
would you say?
I beg your pardon again, sorry?
What would you say it is?
Why some people struggle to want to fight for that relationship for themselves? It's a very kind of broad question, but I think sometimes, if this is the relationship with ourselves here, if this is the list, or not even the list, if this is many things, we are piled and things like stacked on top of that relationship with ourselves, and again, it could be anything, it could be priorities to values to experiences to people to like having those sort of like emotional disconnects to yourself. Like it varies, so it's almost like to get to the bottom and to kind of like, fight for that sort of inner relationship with yourself. It takes a lot of inner work, and I think some people hear, oh, okay, I understand hearing, like you have to have a relationship with yourself. But once you start on that journey, like, it's almost like you're completely taken away with a lot of things that you may start to discover about yourself, and then it becomes completely overwhelming because you didn't realize that there was A, B, C, D, E, all the list of things. And so therefore, some people kind of like run away, or they step away from that and they get back into a reality that they think, is true to them, but yet at the same time is also false. And so, they decide not to go back because they don't want to experience that sort of discomfort. So, I think that's also, that's a key there as well. And also, like, not being able to, maybe it's a part of conditioning as well. They kind of hear about it, but then their habits and their way of thinking doesn't lead them to going back down that sort of route, or even going a bit more further. So they don't truly understand what it actually means to have a relationship with yourself, because they're blinded by other things in life. So yeah, if that somewhat answers the question, if that kind of gives a bit of clarity or sense.
I think it takes time and it takes space, doesn't it? And I don't know that this is like the way the world is at the moment. It doesn't give us that space to be able to work on ourselves, spend made time. They've found time to sit and work on themselves and work on their relationship with themselves. And I think it's not something you do in school, is it? It's not something you sit and look at in school of what are your values, what is your purpose, what's important to you. We learn from our peers, we learn from family, we learn from teachers, and then we learn behaviors, we learn the habits, we learn the values, we learn religion and culture and practices, and we learn it from who we're connected to. But we don't, the school environment and the way that we grow up doesn't facilitate that space to go, okay, there's all of this. What do you want? What do you choose? What's important to you? How do you want to live your life? So, I think there's almost that acceptance that almost you just keep going, you just keep going and life works it out for you, that it's not necessarily a choice. And I think it is a choice. And I think it is, I do feel that you can choose a different path. You don't just have to keep rolling down the same road that you are currently on. If that road isn't working for you, you can choose something different, but don't expect something different to suddenly be very easy, because it will be different and it will take some extra effort and some extra energy. But if you get to the destination that is where you want to get to, rather than the path that you're on, then the extra energy and the effort makes it worth it. But for a lot of people, either they don't stop to think, or the momentum is there, and so they just keep going, and almost that I'll end up where I end up. But actually there's always a different choice. So
there is always a different choice, and that's key. Some people, I see this visualization where if this is a road filled with like needles, coal, glass, debris, and people are walking on this, if you show them a different route, and because of what they believe, and because of like they're afraid to take on something new, or change a course of direction, they stick to what they know. So they stay on that same road for so long until till their feet are ready to retire, sort of thing. But then again, they don't know that if the road that you're on isn't something that's positive and something that's beneficial, then you can always take a different course of action. So it's just that thing that people are afraid to take a different.
But if that's the road that you've always walked, then you learn to walk that road, don't you? You learn to get comfortable with that path. And so the thought that another path might exist and might actually be easier, or might end up with a better destination at the end of it, it's not always on people's radar, is it? They think that that's where life has, that's what life has chosen for them, and so that's what they have to work with. And yeah, helping people to see that there is a different path is, you know, I guess part of the work that both of us are doing, in just helping people see that there are different options there, and giving them that support to walk those first steps on that new path until they're ready to walk it on their own. Question.
Fair enough. Okay. And that's a great way. That's another great way to look at it. So next question. Okay. So now this is broad, but you know, if we're through your work or whatever, we're gonna you know, go through you. But so they say look within, and when you look within, everything is right there, right? But then the question is, okay, when you look within, what are some places or some areas that you would advise to work on towards becoming your better version?
When you look within, where to start?
Yeah, where to start, or what are some places, like, you know, I know it varies person by person, but you know, what would you say are, like, you know, top priorities in terms of, like, where would you look within, and where would you start, basically?
So if I talk through, like, so if I'm working with people, I tend to start with their values, their needs, and their purpose. So looking at that kind of inner, I guess that's looking within, but think what is important to you. What are things that you feel are important in life? What things do you want in life that are important to you? And also, so not just what do you want for you, but what can you give to others, or can you give to the world? Because I think that sense of contribution can really help. So I think that's normally where I start with people, and then we see where that conversation goes. So I think the values is really important for me, of just understanding, you know, it doesn't just help the relationship with ourselves and how we make decisions and the directions that we take, but it also helps our relationships with other people, because when we know what's important to us, we can communicate that to other people. It's very hard for other people to understand what's important for us if we can't work it out ourselves. So it's, you know, it's a lot easier if I've worked that out, for me to be able to communicate that with you and say, okay, these are the things that are really important to me. But if I don't know that, it's very hard for me to explain that to somebody else, and explain why certain things are upsetting me, or why certain things make me angry, or why certain things make me feel a certain way. I can't explain that if I haven't worked out what is going on. So that's certainly what you know, what I look at with people is the values, what their needs are. So not just the, you know, the hierarchy of, you know, the Maslow physiological, psychological needs, but our emotional needs as well. You know, what's important to us, you know, what puts the smile on our faces, what kind of lifts us and gets us out of bed in the morning, but not just the inwards, what we need from other people, but what we can give to other people. And that's normally where I start with people, and then just see where that conversation goes, because quite often that can start a real conversation around what is missing, what they want more of, what they've got that they want more of. What, you know, sometimes that can be, you know, I've had conversations with people where, you know, through those conversations they've worked out that actually their work is completely out of alignment, so they look to change their work, or they look for a voluntary role that helps to fill the gap. So it's just, I think that's where you start. But I think a lot of people look inwards of, okay, what do I need? What do people or situations need to give me? And quite often then what they miss is what can I give? You know, what can I give to my family, my community, to the world? I think there's just as much it's just as important to focus on what's within that can be given as to much to what's within that's needed. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. It does. You know, it's almost having the balance between what you're taking in and what you're giving out, sort of thing. You know, and like I guess you kind of intuitively know where you're taking enough in, but you're also giving it in a way where it also brings out the best in you, I guess. You know, and also like,
well, you look at your mentoring work, like those young people that you work with, they get so much from you, but how much do you get out? How much do you gain from that time with them? You're giving, but you're taking, you are gaining at the same time.
Oh, sorry, are you asking me, or are you just throwing in an example?
I guess it's a statement, but is that something you would agree with? Like, I think a lot of people, sometimes there's people lose out by not giving, because in giving you gain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's just like, you know, you have something valuable to share, and at the same time, when you're sharing, you're also improving, for example, your communication, or you're also improving that relationship with the other person that you're talking to, or you're giving something that may be what's the word I'm looking for here, rewarding to that person. Therefore, you feel, you know, honored or rewarded. You have that rewarding sort of feeling as well. So you feel like you're making a difference, you know. So no, that makes absolute sense. You know, it makes absolute sense. And it's
and that's,
very insightful to hear that.
Making a difference is one of my values. So for me, it's not necessarily about making by me going out and making a difference, I gain like double the amount back. So, you know, that's for me is one of the values, is making a difference. So I know that's when I'm at my most fulfilled, when I'm at my happiest, is when I feel like a difference has been made. So sometimes if I can't see the difference, I get frustrated, and that doesn't mean that the difference isn't there, but if I can't see it, if I don't have that measure of it, I find that quite frustrating. And so I have to remind myself, and there's stuff written on the wall that reminds me that not every difference is visible. So I have to keep that in check, because that's really important for me to know that what I do makes a difference, you know. And it doesn't need to be on a grand scale, but, you know, at some level. So yeah, but from, you know, like with your mentoring, you know, what they take away and what you take away is two very different things, but are of just as much value.
And to add to that a little bit, it's almost like you're met with a challenge, you know. So, you know, challenges always challenge you to bring your best part of you to try and solve this sort of obstacle or get over this hump, or whatever the case is. So yeah, I mean, there's that. I'm sure that adds a little bit as well, you know, especially like when. But
it jumped a little bit then. Go on.
Oh, okay. No, I was just gonna say
I missed the last bit that you said.
As I said, where you have some clients sometimes, and you know, they talk to you, they communicate with you about something that you've never heard of before. So, you know, if this person's telling you something, they trust you to help them overcome it. So therefore you're gonna go away and you're gonna, okay, it's like you're taking something, but once you gain the necessary insight or information or whatever it is, you take that and you share it back with that person in a way that helps them to feel empowered, you know, and therefore you're reaping that sort of, you're giving, but you're also you're taking and also giving and reaping that sort of reward as well.
Yeah,
If that makes
and
sense.
with every challenge, the opportunity to grow, isn't there? There's the opportunity to learn, and then there's the opportunity to learn something new. And I think what you said at the beginning about that us being the most important resource, and who we are and is our most important resource, is absolutely true. But it also needs to be invested in. It can't be a resource that just gets parked and left. It's a resource that needs to be, it needs to be looked after, and it needs to be, you need to, again, like it needs to be invested in. It can't just sit there and lay stagnant. And that does mean that sometimes you've got to challenge it, and you've got to, that's where the growth comes in, isn't it? That's where you learn. That's where you get an opportunity to see things differently, or learn a different way, especially if it doesn't work how you would normally do it, and you have to look at different ways of trying something that can make a big difference. But it's more resources that go back in.
100%.
More tools for the toolbox.
More towards the toolbox, yeah. Well, I guess you don't really need all the tools, but as long as you have the key tools, then you can solve anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
There are definitely some key tools that need to be in. As I say, there's definitely needs to be some key tools in there.
Definitely. Just need to figure out what tools to put in there. So maybe final one or two last questions. So next question is
I'm not saying so.
We shall see. Maybe we might have enough time, may not. But so next question is, how does having a relationship with yourself affect having a relationship with others, both positively and negatively?
So I think we've probably kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think I'm watching the comments come in. I think when you have a good relationship with yourself and you understand yourself, it makes it easier for you to help other people to understand you. And I guess considering my single status is probably a textbook answer, a hypothetical answer, but I do think that when you know who you are and what you're about, I think it helps people to understand you and what's important. I think it's very easy to be molded by other people when you haven't worked out who you are. So I think it's very easy when you meet people to be shaped and be molded, and it's very easy to be influenced into what other people want and what other people think is important when you haven't quite worked that out for you. Now, that's not to be said that relationships don't need that negotiation, understanding each other. But if you haven't worked that bit out, you can't ask somebody else to work that out for you. That's something you have to work out for you. And I think sometimes, people enter into relationships and want the other person to help them get out. They want them to help them find the answers. And I think people can be very supportive, and they can help support somebody to do that. But ultimately, that's something that you need to work out for you. And I think when you know that, when you worked that bit out, so there's the that's just come in from Terry. You have to love yourself to be lovable. And I think that is very, very true. Of actually, when you have a good, healthy relationship with yourself, it puts you in a good position to have a good, healthy relationship with somebody else. I think people can support you, and they can support you to do that, but they can't do that for you. So you have to, that's time that you need to work on for you, and then you can take that in. But ultimately, I do think that you having a healthy relationship with yourself is like it's what helps having a very good, healthy, positive relationship with somebody else.
It's interesting because when you go along that lines or that journey of having a relationship with yourself, you sometimes feel like you have to isolate yourself from other people, only for you to like really dig deep and go into that garden of yours and try to pull out those roots and try to pull out those things that you don't need to be there. And sometimes like it could be a lonely sort of journey, and sometimes it actually is, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's good. Of course, it's good to have a support system, but then like you say, you have to want to do it for you, because there's only so much support that somebody can give until they feel like, okay, you know what, this person is actually relying on me, counting on me, is wanting me to be that sort of resource and stuff like that, and then eventually, potentially, they could potentially pull out and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's like I'm trying to be comfortable with being alone, going down the journey of having to have a relationship with yourself or wanting a relationship with yourself, that it's almost like people sometimes tend to, that idea they get discomfortable about.
Yeah, and I think to use the garden analogy, I think it's really important that you've got to be in there and work out what you're pulling up and getting rid of. What are weeds to you? I mean, I love daisies, but they're a weed. So you got to work out what you want to keep in your garden and what you want to get rid of. And other people can't work that bit out for you. You've got to work out. You've got to sit in there and work that bit out. And it is uncomfortable, and it is lonely. It can be that, but it's I think it is really important to do. And it doesn't need to be, it's not always going to be a long process. I don't think it's always going to be difficult, but I think it is important. And I think, unfortunately, it's easier for some people to distract themselves by being with other people than it is to sit in that space and work that bit out. But you're still going to take that with you. If you don't work it out, you're still going to take it into that relationship or that friendship or the people that you spend time with. You can't just lock the door and leave it at home when you go out. It's part of you. It's going to come with you. So sometimes just sitting and working that through can, will benefit a lot of people. But, like Terry's saying, if you don't like your own company, why would others? And I think sometimes just, healing, giving yourself time to heal and giving yourself time to move on from something, it means then it's done. Even if it's a long process, it's still shorter than carrying it around with you for the rest of your life and impacting other people with that. So weighing up the options, I think.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's well, so when you're weighing out your options, between what is toxic and what is healthy, it's almost like, how does somebody choose, what is like, how do they choose what is unhealthy and how they pull it up and pick it up and put it in the trash? Because sometimes people have a hard time opening up their hand and just letting go, and it's that, I don't know, it's almost that sort of that emotion of loss, that they don't want to feel like they're losing something, but yet what they're holding on to isn't something that's also helping them to heal or helping them to grow or helping them to enhance that relationship with themselves. So what are your sort of like words of encouragement for people who feel like they're afraid to let go, or they can't let go? Like, what would you tell that person?
I think that is probably more common than most people think. And I think a lot of people who talk about letting things go think that it's not something that people understand, that it's not something that people go through. But actually, I hear it a lot. And I think a lot of people carry the experience, and they carry what's happened, or they carry the experience. And I feel that you don't need to carry the whole experience, that you can take the learning from that experience and you can leave the experience behind. So you can take what you've learned from things that have happened, positive and negative, so that you don't repeat it in the future. But you don't need to carry the whole thing with you. But letting go is hard, you know, letting go of something that's familiar, even when it's uncomfortable. Letting go of something that's familiar is tough for people, because it's something that they understand, and even when they know it's not good for them, even when they know that it's not healthy, it's toxic, they, you know, actually just dump it and walk. That's really, really tough when it's familiar and it's what you know. And quite often, you know, it's something that becomes, you know, almost within, you know, it's not even just something that's being carried, it's something that's kind of, it feels like it's part of who they are because they've carried it for so long. So, you know, I think somebody described it once to me that it's like carrying a really big sack of rocks, you know, and it's just like all of their experiences, everything that ever happened to them was being carried with them. And so and we actually went through this exercise of, we almost visualized unpacking this sack of rocks and what each rock was, and okay, what was the experience, what was the learning, and we took the rocks away, we'd held on to the learning and we threw the rocks away, so that the sack was a lot lighter for them to carry. And it, you know, it was quite a powerful exercise to do. But we don't need to carry everything to help us to move forward. We can take what we've learned and then we can use that to help us to move forward. And I think that's probably, you know, I think, remind me of the question, I might have gone off, but I think that would be my kind of go-to response is, okay, what did you learn from it? What's helpful for you to carry on, and what would be helpful to leave behind? And although it might be hard to leave it behind, actually, if you left it behind, how might life feel different? How might life be different or look different?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Does that
answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does. It definitely does. And this is my last and final question. Okay, literally my last and final question. And this is to kind of go back into what we were just talking about. So then, would you say that the relationship with yourself comes within some of those experiences, or would you say your relationship with yourself help? I'm sorry. I'm trying to ask about letting go. So I would say, does the relationship with yourself, like, does it help you to ease some of those things and let go? Like, would you find it easier to let go of things when you have a relationship with yourself? That's the question I'm actually trying to ask.
I think again, it almost links back to the first question when we talked about having that inner confidence and that trust in yourself, and that self-confidence. I think it's, if you've got that, it's a lot easier to let the external things go, or to let things that are related to external factors go, because that internal resource is there. Does that make sense? If you feel like you are good enough, worthy enough, you trust yourself enough, that you know that you are just good enough as you are, that you don't need external validation, you don't need external things or external situations or external people to reaffirm that or validate that. When you have that relationship and you're like, do you know what, I'm good, it's a lot easier to leave other things behind. And I think when that's not full here, or when there's a question over it, we'll look for something external to fill that. And so even when we do that with a negative, so sometimes, you know, people will try and fulfill a need, but in a negative way. So like if I'm lacking that self-worth, or I'm lacking that validation of being a good person, I might try and validate that through external people or external situations to try and fill that gap. Now, I can do that in a positive way, but I might do that in a negative way. And so when we have that, and that bit is full, we don't need the external things to top it up. So it's a lot easier to leave it behind.
Well, there you go then.
Does that make sense? Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Yes,
like,
you have that relationship with yourself.
If you work on it here, if you work on it here, you don't need the external things to add into it, because it makes it external rather than something you're trying to pull in.
Okay. That
Great
makes
question.
perfect sense. Say that again.
Okay, good. I said that was a great question, and hopefully my answer explained it.
And it did perfectly. So yeah, and that's all the questions that I have. So yeah, no, that was
they were great.
Sorry, go ahead. It's kind of lagging a little bit. My bad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was just going to say some of the showing appreciation for your questions as well. So, and it's just between Wi-Fi and heat.
It is the worst combination, isn't it?
This has not been the easiest one, that's for sure. So you've had really challenging questions, heat and challenging Wi-Fi. So thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
No worries, though. Thank you so much for having me. Some of the questions you found were engaging.
It was great. They were great questions. Thank you so much. And thank you to the people who have tuned in and joined the conversation. And we'll be back with another one very soon. Thank you, Dan. And good night to everybody.
Good night.